Hello, today we're going to practice factors, greatest common factors, and least common multiples. First, factors are numbers and expressions that when multiplied together give you a value. So for example, if we have something like 6, 6 is 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. So it has 4 factors, 1, 2, 3, and 6. What we're going to be dealing with more on the ACT are things like 12x squared. 12x squared, you're going to deal with the number first and then deal with the variables. So factors of 12, 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. And x squared is x times x. So 12x squared has 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 12, x and x as its factors. Generally, we would write it like this. We talked about in class a little bit prime factorization, and we did factor trees. If you were doing prime factorization, you wouldn't list the 4 and the 6 and the 12. You would just list how many 2's there are, how many 3's there are, that kind of thing. So moving on, the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor is called the GCF. When you do these problems using your graphing calculator, which I would suggest doing, especially because on the ACT they're going to give you numbers that are kind of large, and you may not know all of the factors, all of the numbers that multiply to give you that. They call it the GCD, greatest common divisor. But it is the largest value that goes into 2 or more expressions. Confusing as it may sound, it will never be larger than your smallest value. So what that means, if I have 12 and 20, 12 is 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. 20 is 1 times 20, 2 times 10, and 4 times 5. So if you see here, they both have a 4 in common. So their largest value would be 4. Their greatest common factor would be 4. All right, 4 is smaller than both of these numbers. If I had 12 and 24 as my two numbers, then they would both have a 12 in common because 12 goes into 24. So we would say their greatest common factor, the largest value, is 12. When there's variables, again, deal with the numbers and then deal with the variables. So if we had 15x and 25x squared, 15 is 1 times 15 times x. It's also 3 times 5 times x. 25x squared is 1 times 25 times x, or 5 times 5 times x. As you can see here, they have a 5 and x in common, so we would say their greatest common factor is 5x. If there's nothing in common, those numbers are considered prime values. They have no greatest common factor, but if you look at the factors here, they always have a 1 in common. All right, so you wouldn't say they have no factor in common. You would say they have a value of 1. And then least common multiple, the LCM, the least common multiple, is the smallest multiple that both terms can go into. And just like with the greatest common factor, it's kind of misleading because this number will be big. It will never be smaller than your largest value. So if we have 4 and 18, generally what you would do is you would multiply the two values together and then divide by any common factor. So 4 is 1 times 4 and 2 times 2. 18 is 1 times 18, 2 times 9, and 3 times 6. So if we multiply those two things together, 18 times 4, we would get 72. But they have a 2 in common. So I'm going to be dividing out one of these 2's, all right, because I don't need to count it twice. So when I do that, 72 divided by 2 is 36. So the least common multiple of 4 and 18 would be 36. Where it gets more difficult is on the ACT, where they give you 3 values. I'm going to send you a video that will show you how to do this using your graphing calculators, which is way easier than this way that I'm going to explain to you. But just in case, if you wanted to use this, you can go ahead and use this. You just find the least common multiple of the first two numbers. So we have 12 and 18. 12 times 18 is 216. And if you notice, they have a 6, so 2 and 6, and 3 and 6. So we would divide 216 by 6, and you would get 36. So that would be the least common multiple of these two numbers. You then find the least common multiple of your 36 and your third number. So 36 times 30 is 1,080. When we take and find the factors there, we have 6 and 6 and 5 and 6. So they again have a 6 in common. So we would divide by 6, which would give us 180. So the least common multiple of 12, 18, and 30 is 180. All right, again, I'm going to send you a video that's going to show you how to do this using your graphing calculator, and it's way easier to do it that way. I would just practice because, again, being able to remember all of these factors and all of your multiplication steps is going to make this very time consuming and not something you're going to want to spend a lot of time on the ACT.